Welcome to the Putback with Ian Begley here on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY's NBA insider. We're going to break things down. Knicks trade deadline, a little around the league stuff over the next half hour or so. And I've got two great guests to join me today. I have Marc Berman, enjoying the good life in Florida right now, but longtime Knick beat writer, was the dean of the beat for as long as I can remember. Jonathan Macri, the dean of Knicks Film School. Knicks Film School, great Knick content daily, twice a day, 3 times a day. If you're not subscribing, go change that and subscribe because they do a great job. Before we get into our show, I want to remind you guys, leave your questions in the comments. We're going to get to a few of those questions in a segment later called the Talkback. But first, as always, we're starting with the baseline. Now, Knicks, Raptors. Knicks handling business up there in Toronto. It got a little hairy late. Jalen Brunson delivering late in this game. Karl-Anthony Towns, obviously, big first half. Jonathan, your thoughts walking away from that game?
I mean, a win is better than a loss, right? Ian, especially at this time of year, kind of dog days of the season, going through it. I think second night of a back-to-back, for me, kind of wipes away some of the concerns about them giving up a big lead. But I think the more important thing, if we're looking big picture, is Ariel Hukporti, who I know is a guy a lot of fans have been excited to see more of, showed a little bit of promise in the preseason. The fact that he came in, gave you some real nice rotation minutes, in particular on the defensive end, had a couple nice possessions against Scotty Barnes. Maybe something that factors into their thinking down the stretch of the season. I'd be curious about that. But listen, we have Jalen Brunson and the Toronto Raptors did not. So that's all that ended up mattering at the end of the day.
Marc, I'm curious, kind of big picture, because Brunson has delivered these last 2 games late. You were your last, I think, weeks on the beat was you were just saying Donovan Mitchell trade, Jalen Brunson, and coming on. And so did you see this coming from him? Are you surprised by what he's been able to do?
I mean, we had written so much about Brunson before he joined the Knicks. And I remember one scout I talked to saying that in the very first meeting Leon Rose had with his scouts, he said one of the big targets on his radar, in fact, the top target on his radar, is his former client, Jalen Brunson. And the scouts, who most of them don't work for the Knicks anymore, were stunned. They're like, really? That's your top target? So you got to give an amazing amount of credit for Leon Rose to see the superstar in Jalen, although I think he's outshone even Leon's greatest expectations. One thing about last night, after the game, I guess he talked about his free throw shooting. He's shooting 81%. And he's complaining that he's not making enough free throws. And to me, that's an amazing thing for this great player to be nitpicking about his free throw shooting. And his free throw shooting is going to be huge in the playoffs because he gets fouled a lot. They really call it close. Jalen got all the calls in the playoffs last year, I thought. But just to hear him after a victory, after another great game, he's whining about his free throw shooting, unless he said that in the pregame. I'm not sure, but he was quoted talking about his free throw shooting woes, and yet he's at 81%.
Yeah, he's a winner. I mean, it's just kind of what he exudes and how he carries himself and what he says, what he does. He is about winning first and foremost, and that's really turned things around for this franchise. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that. We are going to hit a segment called On the Radar now, where we're kind of setting things up for the trade deadline, which is 3 p.m. Thursday. Knicks, I think they can't trade Ariel Hukporti today, but they can trade him tomorrow. Not that that matters because they're not moving him anyway. Landry Shamet, they also cannot trade. Expiring contracts, Precious Jewett, campaign, and Jericho Sims. And so there's not a lot there. We talked a lot about backup center and Jonas Valanciunas, Daniel Tice, names like that. But more recently, especially yesterday, a couple teams said the Knicks are not talking about Mitchell Robinson right now. And so I think checking in on many sides there. I don't think there's anything there. It seems to me like they're set with Robinson, and they're going to see Robinson come back and see how he looks later in the spring. So I don't see much happening between now and 3 p.m. Thursday. Jericho Sims move, I still see that as likely. But Marc, you've covered a ton of trade deadlines. What do you see with this team? What should they do? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, Leon, I remember right before the trade deadline, I know he's told people, I don't want to ruin the chemistry, the great chemistry in our locker room. So he's very hesitant to make a deal at the deadline in the past. I think he loves what's going on in that locker room. I don't think there's any needs. I asked about a couple of people about, what about Jimmy Butler? Did the Knicks ever inquire? Told not at all. Even though, listen, Tibbs and Butler, despite maybe some words that Butler said, they're like family. They do love each other. Butler knows what Tibbs did for his career. But the Knicks are set. I mean, they're set there. Sims would be for a 2028 second-round pick or something. I mean, he never progressed offensively, and it's unfortunate. Listen, he was the 59th or 58th pick in the draft, so it's not like he underachieved. He's a third-string center. So yeah, they'll probably look to get some draft capital for Sims. But with Mitchell Robinson, asking around the last couple of days, the Knicks know about his medical history. Not all teams know, and if they get a nice offer, they'll probably do it. I just don't think there's any offers coming in. And the question is, was it the Knicks' choice to withhold him from coming back until after the trade deadline because they didn't want him to break down? And I think the Knicks, if there was a nice offer for Mitchell, they would do it. I think they know that there's some significant medical issues with his feet. And I think they really were very, very slow in bringing him back because they didn't want to bring him back 2 weeks before the deadline. He gets hurt, then you can't trade him. But yeah, listen, I don't think there's going to be anyone offering anything substantial for Mitchell. That's an off-season move. Will the Knicks make it? I think it's a buyout. In the buyout market, the Knicks are going to try to add depth, maybe a backup center. It looks like, listen, I love Valanciunas, but he may be going to the Suns, right? And I don't know how you make that deal, what you give up. He'd be a perfect fit. But Hukporti, as Macri mentioned, I hear great things about him just in general, his toughness. He's just a gritty player who maybe does some I heart things. And, when I did a podcast in preseason, if you remember CT, he does another podcast in Australia, and Hukporti played in Australia. He was raving about the guy. He said, this guy is a player. Don't sleep on Hukporti. So we'll see if anything happens tomorrow. Listen, if someone comes up with the Lakers always liked Mitchell. We thought the Lakers were going to draft him with the 25th pick back in the day, and worked him out and all. So the Pelinka's still there. So I'm sure if the Lakers could come up with a package, but I just don't think this is a big enough package to trade Mitchell.
Now, why would you, if you're another team now, and he hasn't been on the floor yet? Right. I don't think that package is coming. There's something about you saying don't sleep on Hukporti that really made me miss you on the Knick beat. I could just see it in print somewhere or a tweet. I'm nostalgic right now. John, your thoughts on the Knicks and the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading your tea leaves that you've been leaving, Ian, about Jericho Sims. I mean, if you look at the situation, I mean, what do we keep talking about here with the Knicks and what their needs are? They need backup big man insurance for if Mitchell Robinson can't come back and produce. Well, in theory, Jericho Sims should be the exact sort of player that they would want to acquire. He, has good rim protection numbers. He could get a rebound for you. I think he's shown the ability to have some modicum of versatility on the defensive end as far as if you need to switch him out or play a little bit more of an aggressive coverage. And yet they're looking to move on and they're looking in other directions, which tells me, I think Marc kind of alluded to this very well, that his lack of progress as an offensive player, I mean, it was kind of painful to watch. I feel bad saying this because he seems like a really nice guy, but there were times when he was out there this year and they threw him the ball and it's like, you're afraid if he takes a dribble, like what might happen. So, I mean, I'm curious if you have any insight, because I look at it as maybe they attach a second rounder or a couple second rounders to him to bring in someone that can help them, maybe not as part of a playoff rotation, but as someone who could at least eat some minutes down the stretch of the regular season. Obviously, OG Anunoby's out right now. And they've been pretty lucky with injuries. So if they could get someone in there that Tibbs will trust, which I know is a high bar, I'd just be curious who else, on a minimum contract, because the money matters here too. They can't obviously trade and bring in more money than they're sending out. Not a lot of options, but I'd be curious what's out there.
I don't know. I don't know what contract Alex Len has right now. I know that he was a name that was brought up. Daniel Tice, I don't know what his deal is either. I don't have it in front of me, but he was a name that's brought up. So maybe that's the way they go. The other point here is, just in talking to a couple of people, if the Knicks do trade Sims and they take back less salary, then they've got a little more room under that second apron to add a veteran free agent. I think starting March 1st right now, if their money stays the same, is the date where they can slide that prorated veterans minimum under the second apron, whether it's TJ Warren, Chuma Akeki, another player that we're not even talking about. They will have the opportunity to do that March 1st. And if they shed salary at the deadline, I think they can do it even sooner. So just something to keep an eye on there when we're talking about potential returns for Jericho. John, perfect world, you're running the team. Do you stand pat at the deadline? Do you go out and get insurance? What would you do?
I mean, to me, it's such an interesting situation with Mitchell Robinson, because in theory, he is exactly maybe not exactly what they need, because we've seen him against some of the better floor spacing teams like Boston, who, as it sets up right now, is the team they're going to have to get past in the playoffs, and how, Mitch is not always great against those sorts of offenses defensively. But in terms of a guy who can at least help your defense in terms of pick and roll coverage, I think the minutes that we saw last night, especially from Towns and Hukporti, can give you a little bit of faith that, hey, if you slot Mitchell Robinson into that Hukporti spot, that could work. Now, I think those players are a little bit differently. Hukporti has some nice skills on offense. So if you have this guy and no one is willing to give you anything for him, and you're essentially going to need to treat his contract as, neutral money at best, and maybe even as a negative asset because of the injury question marks, then I kind of think maybe the best move is to sit tight. You keep your fingers crossed. You hope he comes back. Like we talked about, if there's an opportunity to move Sims for a little extra insurance, whether it's a big man or a wing, you do that. But, you have Precious here. Hukporti showed a little something last night. So it's not like you're in desperate need of going out, and trying to get another big man. Like, they're not the Lakers, who have just like nothing in the middle right now. So I would not be apoplectic if the deadline passed tomorrow and we're sitting here and they didn't make any kind of a significant move.
All right, we've shared our thoughts. Now we're going to go to a segment called Trade Machine. And in this segment, we are going to get into some fan-submitted trades, see if they make sense, they don't make sense. I'm excited for this one. We haven't done it before. I think that we are starting with, is it a Walker Kessler for Mitchell Robinson and picks trade? And that's from Green Panda GP on Twitter. Kessler, look, Ainge has held a high price on Kessler for a while. I know that the Lakers were knocking on that door post Luka Doncic trade, and I don't think he's going to end up in LA. But I do think that when you're talking about that draft compensation, it's got to be pretty significant if you're asking Ainge to take on salary for a young player who they clearly value. I think the draft compensation, the Knicks probably don't have it in their war chest there to make that move. And I don't know. What do you think, John, about getting Walker Kessler in here?
Yeah, I'm just looking in terms of any cap exceptions that the Jazz have, because the money for that one doesn't work. And yeah, I'm looking at it right now. They don't have a salary cap exception that they'd be able to slide Mitchell Robinson into because he makes a decent number. I mean, Walker Kessler's an interesting one because you're he kind of fell back in their rotation a little bit last year. Didn't always start games. This year, he's had an okay season. They've been terrible, so it's tough to judge anything that's going on over there in Utah. But based on the reporting from this summer, it seems like they want a lot, and they should want a lot. I think he profiles as someone who could at the very least be a top 10 defensive center. He has enough skills on the offensive end to keep you honest. If I was Utah, I would want, multiple first round picks, including a really juicy trade asset. And even if, for argument's sake, they were comfortable giving up Kessler for like the Knicks, 2030, first round pick swap. If you're the Knicks, that's like the last really valuable asset you have right now, at least until the summer when your 2032 pick will become available. So, are you gonna expend that asset? Let's pretend that the money worked out, right? Are you going to expend that asset on a guy where, it looks like you're kind of all in on Towns playing at the 5? You've been you're 51 games in, the vast majority of his minutes has come at the 5. I just don't see a match being made there.
Mark, I want to hit you on this next one from Knicks Feed. Now he or she is suggesting Javonte Green or Gershon Yabusele for Jericho Sims. Green, the money wouldn't work. I believe Yabusele, the money would work for the Knicks. Philly, they just made a trade, so financially they have the opportunity to offer Yabusele a significant contract. I don't think you're getting him unless you're attaching a lot of draft compensation in addition to Jericho Sims. But Mark, your thoughts on that deal?
Well, let me just add something about Mitchell. Obviously, his trade value is at the bottom right now. And if you remember how amazing he played against the Cleveland Cavaliers, naturally the Knicks may never get to see Cleveland because they're matched up with Boston probably in the second round. But right now, if you'll probably want to trade Mitchell Robinson in the summer, especially if he doesn't, if he has another injury. But I just feel you roll the dice, you get Mitchell Robinson back. I think he's the wild card player that could get you past Boston. The Knicks, to me, right now are second round and out, currently constituted without Mitchell. Towns has been great at the 5, but you need a backup, just like the iHeart situation last year. You need Mitchell Robinson. Cross your fingers. He's healthy. He does Mitchell Robinson things. There are very few players in the NBA that does what Mitchell Robinson can do. So, like I said before, unless you're getting a real package for him, it's ridiculous to trade him for Walter Kessler, who has just lost a lot of games with the Utah Jazz, who just lose, as Macri said, has been in a losing situation, a losing environment. All he knows is losing in the NBA. I know with Yabusele, I know there's a Knicks scout who still works there who used to really like him, and the Knicks had tried to trade for him a few years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if they added him. Can you get Sims for him? I think the Knicks would do it in a second. But yeah, I still feel the buyout market could be a better situation for the Knicks here. But regarding Mitchell, I think we forget how amazing Mitchell was 2 years ago in that Cleveland series and how much of a wild card he could be in getting them to the NBA Finals. Right now, the Knicks look like second round and out with the Boston Celtics looming.
And I think, Mark, from a sentimental perspective, not that this factors in, but longest tenured Knick, been through a lot, bad seasons, developed here, grown here. He deserves a shot to play with what would be the best Knick team since he's been here. So I'm glad it looks like he's going to get that shot. We have another deal from a fan here from AMR Mets 15 on Twitter. Looks like a 3-way deal. Knicks getting Sexton, Drummond, Yabusele. Sixers getting Precious, Jericho Sims, Tyler Kolek. And Utah getting Mitch Pocom-Dadier. And that would be Eric Gordon. Okay. Yeah, I think going back to Philly, like with Yabusele, they would never do Yabusele for Jericho Sims straight up. And I don't think they would. I think they would say no in terms of answering that question. Who would say no? So I think let's get to the next one. because that one, it's a little bit interesting. Austin Reeves for Mitchell Robinson from Jordan CZNYK, because we know the Lakers, they do need a center. We've talked about Mitch and why he's probably staying. I don't think the Lakers would offer Austin Reeves for Mitchell Robinson straight up. I think you'd have to put more on the table if you're the Knicks to get Austin Reeves. But we've talked about why Mitchell Robinson is likely to stay here. What would LA have to come up with as an offer for John, for you to say, all right, you could take Mitchell Robinson, I want back what you are offering?
I mean, Reeves frankly, is not a name I had even contemplated in connection to the Knicks, because he is obviously a defensively challenged perimeter player, and I just don't think, even with Sexton, on the previous fake trade can defend a little bit, but he's still whatever he is, 6'2". I just don't think the Knicks are in the business of going out and acquiring players who, perimeter players who they don't feel comfortable being able to put next to Jalen Brunson on the perimeter. I mean, Deuce McBride is here already, and I think you see even him, and this was obviously the situation with Emmanuel Quickley, because Tibbs is only going to trust these kind of smaller backcourts, especially someone alongside Brunson, so much. So I don't know that there's anyone on the Lakers that I would say is an obvious candidate to come back. I mean, they have a guy that I wanted before he got traded to LA in Dorian Finney-Smith. I don't see any reason why the Lakers would want to turn around and move him just after they got him. But if I was going to pick someone on LA that I would say, yeah, I want that guy, it would be Dorian Finney-Smith for sure.
All right, that's all we have for the fake trades here. We are moving on to what we learned. What we learned is presented by Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Visit binghamton.edu for more. And we're going to an Albany State alum. Speaking of upstate schools,
because if I knew Binghamton was sponsoring this show, I definitely would have declined. Everyone knows that going to Albany, it's a much, much better town and great business school and journalism.
Well, there you have it. I mean, I'm going to leave that there. We've learned Marc Berman's thoughts on the Knicks, thankfully, through Twitter. He's in Florida. He's living his life. He's doing great as a retiree, but he still fires off some tweets every now and again, and I really enjoy them. So let's go through one or two here. We have Berman quote tweeting an article about the Knicks stars defending Tom Thibodeau for his workload management, and Marc says, "Can't believe 2 years, 3 months after retiring, this is still a burning issue. If Knicks break down again in playoffs, Tibbs will be doing color commentary next season for Peacock." Now, look, yes, there's a facetious nature to that tweet, but it's a real thing, right? The minutes and the injuries, and it's maybe reductive just to blame Tibbs, but that's what'll happen if they do break down late in the season. But Marc, I'm curious, what spurred you? What inspired you to log on?
I was hacked. Well, Macri had mentioned Austin Reeves, who I kind of like as a player, and it's sort of like if the Knicks ever added a player of that nature, it's because they're afraid OG is not going to be healthy for the playoffs. I mean, they may need another wing type player. My concern is injuries with this club. Obviously, Mitchell coming back, and he could get injured. I think if Mitchell is healthy, I think they have maybe a shot against Boston or Cleveland. But, Thibodeau plays these guys 40-plus minutes. Miles McBride could take it. And I will say that, we haven't talked enough about Miles McBride, who is just such a tough guy. The players that I'm told in that locker room just respect him so much. And he's a clutch player. And in the playoffs, I think he's going to shine even more. But I'm just afraid this team's going to break down. OG with his sprained foot, what does day-to-day mean? I mean, day-to-day for OG is a little scary because I think there was a comment, we'll see how OG reacts. He's just never come back very quickly from any injury. But the minutes issue with Thibodeau, listen, he's a fantastic regular season coach, maybe the greatest regular season coach in NBA history. But because he plays these key players so many minutes, they broke down last year. There were injuries 2 years ago. If they get injured again and OG breaks down and even Josh Hart or what have you, I think Thibodeau, they'll probably bring him back because Leon just loves the guy to death. But it's a legitimate conversation if the Knicks lose in the second round because of injuries. If they just lose to Boston because Boston is better, or Cleveland, fine. But if they're just completely undermanned because of injuries, and Towns also has never been very durable, I think that Thibodeau has to, take some blame for it.
If you're giving me one wish right now, and I could wish for anything, my wish would be to have a clip of Marc calling Tibbs maybe the best regular season coach of all time, and Tibbs' reaction to that, because it would be amazing. It would be amazing. And you know what? Marc still gets brought up 2 years, 3 months after he leaves the beat. We still talk about him. He's still talked about by the players, by Tom Thibodeau. So he's made a lasting impact here, and I miss him a lot.
Well, that comment was off the record.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. John, where are you on minutes?
Oh, I don't worry about that. I know it's everybody's favorite topic. I know fans go crazy about it. I know fans get mad at me when I attempt to brush it under the rug because I am a diehard loyalist of this coach. I think he's the best thing, aside from Jalen Brunson, to happen to this franchise, since they got Patrick Ewing. Look, I'll give the front office credit. They went out and they, once they kind of realized, though, this is who this coach is. He's not ever going to change. So we either fire him, which I guess they almost did at one point, or we go out and we get him players that fit how he wants to go about his business. And they went out, in addition to getting Jalen Brunson, obviously who you get for other reasons, but you go out and you get a Josh Hart and you get a Mikal Bridges. And I think, those are two of the most durable guys in the league. Marc just talked about Deuce McBride. Deuce McBride is a guy who, if you need him to play 48 minutes, he's going to play 48 minutes. And then when it came to OG, and I guess to a lesser extent Towns, because I don't disagree with Marc. I do think Towns at this point, you kind of have to do. I don't want to call him injury prone, but his track record is what it is. I think OG is their big gamble. And they're betting that, maybe not this year, because I think they need another offseason transaction cycle to get one more piece in here to kind of reinforce things. But I think they're betting if they get this roster healthy for a full playoffs, they could go all the way. And can you'll have probably 3-4 seasons to make that happen. But yeah, I mean, look, this is who he is, and this is part of their culture. Their culture is, if I could walk, I could play. So it's tough because a lot of fans want him to change. A lot of fans want him to curtail, who he is. He's not how he's built, and he's never going to be built like that. So if the front office says, look, this is not something that we believe is sustainable, then they're better off just getting rid of him and moving on, because he's not going to adjust.
Yeah, I think that's where it sits. He is who he is, and that's just where it is. And we're going to move on here to the injury report, but yeah, always an interesting conversation about Tibbs, minutes, and all of it. Injury update here is OG Anunoby. We talked about it a little bit. I think the Knicks dodged a bullet when this MRI came back and the diagnosis remained a mild foot strain. Look, day to day, you never know how long that's going to be, but the idea that it's not Lisfranc, it's not Achilles, it's not anything more severe, I think is dodging a bullet for New York now. Look, I don't see a world where OG plays before the All-Star break. I'm sure they're going to be careful with this thing, but the idea that he's not been ruled out for 6 to 8 weeks, I do think they came out on a positive end of this thing. What could have been a really bad outcome, and I don't think. I mean, I'm curious to hear, Marc, what you think. Would you think this injury impacts what they do at the deadline? I don't think it would. But do you What do you think?
I mean, it is a reminder that OG is injury prone, and if there's an OG insurance policy out there, maybe it's something to think about. But my concern with the Knicks releasing injury information day to day is as vague as it gets, and I think again that comment. We'll see how OG responds. He's never responded well to any injury. It's always taken much longer than anyone ever imagined for him to come back his entire career. And it's like I laughed because Bridges was on the injury report and then he played and continued his incredible streak. I mean, when you think of that streak, he's never missed a game in the NBA. How could a player of both have making so much money, and Bridges has never missed a game in his career, and OG every single season gets hurt for a length of time? I mean, and again, we haven't talked about Bridges enough, and we'll see how he does against Boston in the upcoming game because he was very, very nervous in that season opener. But Bridges is that X factor playoff guy who's he's going to be healthy, and he hasn't been a superstar in the playoffs, but he was in the finals. So, I mean, that's a great, great sign. But the bad sign is OG, because when he gets hurt, when Jalen gets hurt, you always think he's going to be out for a while, and then he's back like 2 days later. With OG, it's the exact opposite.
The one thing that I'll point out is he did come back for that Game 7. Obviously, couldn't really play. But he did.
He came back and he was on one leg, and Thibodeau just.
Didn't go well, hurt them. But he did play.
Actually, hurt them when they. I don't know what the decision making was. I guess OG said he'd try it, but it actually hurt their momentum because he couldn't even move.
And now we have hit on, I think, everything we want to hit on. Now we want to hit on stuff you guys want to hit on. We're going to go to the Talkback. That is our section where we take some fan questions. I'm going to welcome in my friend and yours, Matt Spendley, top digital executive here at SNY. I know him as the Big Spend. He's going to relay some of the fan questions to us, and we're going to get right into it.
Hey, guys. Hope you guys are doing great. Thank you for joining us. John, I got to start with you. Are you guys going to break the losing streak this weekend at the watch party or what? What are you guys, 0-5?
We have lost 4 in a row, but prior to the 4-game losing streak, we won 3 in a row. So there is much, it's rumored that there is a curse. There is no curse. Okay. I will be there, optimistic as always, and everybody should come join me at T Squared Social at 42nd Street, right down the block from Grand Central Station for the Celtics game.
Works out perfectly. Just wanted to shout you out because I know we got a lot of Knicks film school squad in here. I'm coming right back to you because I want to talk about Hukporti after last night, because I think it was clearly the big takeaway. You mentioned it with Cat on pace for a huge game. Still, Hukporti felt like the biggest thing. I'm curious for you, obviously, a big Tibbs guy. I think given how the rotations have gone, I was kind of sitting there last night thinking a little bit like, could Hukporti have gotten minutes a little earlier in the season? Maybe we wouldn't have had all these conversations about what they need at center. But obviously, Tibbs being Tibbs, he would have had to earn a little bit more trust. So Hukporti moving forward, do you have any second guessing that maybe he should have got more burn to this point in the season?
By nature, I'm not someone who second guesses the coach. Many people would criticize that from my approach there. Look, he's a rookie, and as Marc said, he was the 58th pick in the draft. I think, generally speaking, with Tibbs, unless you prove it in practice, you are not going to get an opportunity to prove it in the game. So my assumption, correct or incorrect, would be that it took them a while to see enough of what they needed to see in a practice setting to really insert him. And also, I can't sit here and fully blame them for giving Jericho Sims at least a chance to earn that, what do you want to call it, a backup center job, third string center job, whatever. And they gave him more than enough chances. And I think he showed us everything that we needed to see by now. The thing with Hukporti that I think is particularly interesting, and I wonder if I could peer behind the scenes and look into their practices, I wonder how much they've been running him with Towns in a practice setting. Because last night, him and Towns were out there for a little under 10 minutes. and they outscored the Raptors during those 10 minutes by 15 points in a game that they won, I think, by 6. So you could argue that those minutes were the difference in the game. I think those two looked really good together. And I think given how much Hukporti, how well he moves on the perimeter, he switched on to Scotty Barnes, obviously, for a couple defensive possessions. I'm very excited about what that partnership could look like moving forward, or at least until, Mitchell Robinson, if he does make his return.
I was going to say, portends some of what we will see with Mitch as well. Marc, I want to come to you because we haven't talked a lot about Cat, and obviously he was a new add this year for the Knicks. So I'm just curious what you've thought about Karl-Anthony Towns as a Knick.
Yeah, just one other thing about Hukporti. Someone was saying one of the underrated things about his game, he hits 3 free throws. Obviously, Mitchell Robinson does not hit 3 free throws. Towns has been amazing. A lot. He handled the pressure a lot better than I ever thought. I thought it would take a little while for him to really get adjusted to being in his hometown under the Garden spotlight. I still am a little concerned about the playoffs. I've seen him in Minnesota in a key elimination game late in the second half, and he didn't even want to shoot. I mean, this was 3 years ago, but he just totally did not want the ball, and he was deferring and he was passing up open shots. And this was an elimination game, and I'm like, this guy is a max player, and he doesn't want the ball in an elimination game. So the playoffs as a New York Knick, it's a different world. I know the Garden has been really electric. I could hear it on the television set. But the playoffs, it ramps up like 10 times. And I'm just hoping he handles it. He's showing a lot of confidence all year, and I hope that he has the same exact demeanor, that he is the guy, him and Jalen are the two guys, and he brings it like he's brought it in the regular season. The playoffs are a different ball game, and you're playing the same team over and over and over and over. It's more physical. I just hope this Karl-Anthony Towns version is what we see in the postseason, because if it's not, the Knicks don't have a shot.
And he did have some awesome moments in the playoffs this past year. I know obviously he's had some struggles, but this past year as they advanced Minnesota to the conference finals was pretty awesome. Back to the deadline, Ian, quickly, because this is kind of a lot of the chatter in the group now. Some of the reporting you've had on Mitchell Robinson, we've talked about the center, Sims being an option, but Chino is asking from Twitter, what are the chances the Knicks looks for an upgrade over Shamet before the deadline? So I think a lot of now that discussion becomes some of that wing, guard, backup option. So just specifically, I guess, in terms of that, as they're looking at potentially acquiring anybody for the deadline, what are the chances they look to upgrade more of that position?
So, yeah, the interesting thing there is Landry Shamet, you can't trade him right now if you're the Knicks. So then you would have to put together maybe a Precious Achua or a Miles McBride, and then you're really shaking things up unless it's Mitchell Robinson and draft compensation. So to bring in a quality player to upgrade, as we're saying, over Landry Shamet, I don't think that's within what the Knicks are wanting to do or wanting to spend right now. I'm sure they've discussed many options, but I would be surprised if they deal like a couple rotation players for an upgrade over Shamet. But we'll see how it plays out between now and 3 p.m. Chino, I appreciate the question.
And John, we've talked some about, the buyout in the show as well. I know there's a lot of people just talking about Torrey Craig because he's a guy that got waived. He's had a bit of ankle issues. He's been mentioned as a potential guy, obviously a vet. Is he somebody that you could bring in? Obviously, like we said, the roster, we'll kind of see how things play out after the deadline.
Is he the walking, talking definition of a warm body in the NBA at this point? Yep. He's been around.
Pitcher. That's what he is. We've talked about the show. Maybe it's something we even said before, like he's an innings eater. We talked about those kind of guys for the Knicks. They might need something like that. We talked about that.
Yeah, Shamet is a guy who, in theory, he's always been exactly what you need. He could give you a little bit on defense and he profiles as a shooter, except he never seems to hit enough shots. So I think, we saw last night, kind of back to an 8-man rotation. I wouldn't hate them taking a flyer on Torrey Craig, pending, we'll see who else makes it onto the buyout market. I'm it doesn't seem like PJ Tucker is going to get bought out, and maybe he's not exactly what they need, but that's a name that I'd be curious what they thought of him if he gets bought out. Obviously, he hasn't gotten bought out yet, but yeah, I'd be fine with Craig.
It's funny the deadline conversations we've had in past years versus this year, and I think their proclivity is to want to have a lot of those same conversations, like what can the Knicks do, all this stuff, and as we've talked a lot about, they're very limited. I want to pivot just because obviously we got Marc on here quickly. Marc, what do you miss most about being on the beat? Obviously, we know you're living the good life down in Florida, but what do you miss most on the day-to-day about being on the Knicks beat, seeing Ian's mug every day? What do you miss most?
Believe it or not, it's the interactions with the Knicks fans. It is probably the best fan base in the NBA. And every story you write, you always got a lot of reaction. Whether you're writing about the 15th man or, Carmelo Anthony or, a star player, there's such a passion. And I think I appreciate it more living here in South Florida, which is a terrible professional sports town. No one really cares about the Heat. No one really cares that much about the NBA in general. And I think I just miss living in New York and the passion that people have for the NBA. Florida is football, Miami Dolphins, more football, college football. It's weird. I know ratings are down nationwide, but I feel in the South especially, they must be hurting because it's not just Florida, but the other Georgia, the other football towns here in the South. The NBA is just not that big. And I just miss the passion living in New York and where the NBA is so important and the Knicks are so important and such a part of the culture.
Yeah. Well, given some of the reception to having you on the show, I think a lot of people miss you around as well. You've definitely made your impact. I think we got a lot of people on the YouTube saying it's good to see you. So listen, just saying, like Ian was saying, they're still bringing you up around the garden. They're still bringing you up around the internet too. So clearly made your impact.
Yeah,
I want to see that Berman tweet, "I'm back" at some point.
That's what we need.
Yeah.
And that's what I got.
Matthew, thank you, my friend. We're going to wrap. Before we wrap, we want to hit on one more of Marc Berman's recent tweets. 2 All-Star Knicks starters in Cat and Jalen is very nice nod to brass. But Leon's second-round Rose needs Knicks to get to Eastern Conference Finals for anything to mean anything. Marc, I mean, I hear what you're saying. What you're saying is if they bow out in the second round, there's nothing to celebrate.
Yeah, listen, I know I tweeted that at the moment because I could see how happy and excited and thrilled Knicks fans were to see the 2 All-Star starters, and it was very nice. But the All-Star game means absolutely nothing. And there was some fan voting there in addition to media. But I just feel like it has to be more than the second round. And I feel like right now they're second round and out. The way that the Knicks fans have to hope that the Cavaliers cool off and the Celtics overtake them and the Knicks can face the Cavaliers in the second round. I feel it's a much better matchup. They beat them before. I just feel that the Celtics are going to annihilate them right now, unless Mitchell Robinson is healthy, as presently constituted. And I can't wait to see the next upcoming Boston Celtics-Knicks game. But I feel the Celtics are that much better. The Celtics have everything going their way. Porzingis is the perfect role player there. He's not like a superstar, but he rebounds, he defends, he shoots the 3. They have a great bench. Tatum is amazing. Jaylen Brown rebounds, he scores. I mean, like we're nitpicking on every little thing about the Knicks roster, but it's really about Cleveland and Boston. And as long as those 2 teams are there, it's tough it's all about breaking the curse. If the Knicks are out of the second round, I mean, they have to reevaluate. And maybe, I know people are like, Zion Williamson is someone that, is such a crazy difference of opinion on what Zion is or isn't. But I think in the offseason, if they're out in the second round, they have to figure out another big way to make this roster better.
John, is there a scenario for you where they lose in the second round and you still come away from the season saying they took a step forward, that you're satisfied?
Yeah, I'm gonna sadly pivot from Marc here. Also, please keep Zion Williamson very far away from the basketball team that I root for. I think it depends on how they lose. The Celtics, I find it interesting that you bring up the Celtics because I know they made the trades for Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis before last season, and they won the championship, obviously. But I look at that team and I look at their life cycle and all of the different things that they went through to kind of build up the roster. It took them, almost a decade, this iteration, the Tatum and Brown core, to finally climb the mountaintop. It's not supposed to happen in year one in the NBA. That's not how NBA history works. It's never how NBA history has worked. Even the Heat down in Marc's neck of the woods built what everybody thought was going to be the greatest team of all time. They didn't even win it in year one. So if the Knicks could go into the playoffs and they do wind up facing the Celtics and they give them a tough series and it looks like they have built a core that is capable of beating Boston, even if they don't beat Boston in this particular year, I think what the genius of what Leon Rose has done is he has built, based on the salaries and based on the ages of these guys, a core of players that should be around together for a solid 3-4 year run. And the biggest reason for hope that I have is that, unlike a lot of other situations around the league, Leon Rose has shown patience and he waited. He bided his time until he went all in, which he obviously did this summer. So I'm not too worried that a second round playoff defeat, if it looks like they, are on the same level or close to the same level as a Boston, that he's going to go out there and make some kind of a panic move to the extent that he'd even be able to make one. So, obviously you'd love them to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. You'd love to get to the finals and win it. But for me, no, I'm not sitting here right now saying if they don't make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, the season is, definitely some kind of a failure.
Well, we're going to leave it there, fellas, but that does remind me the Spectrum of Takes, that cartoon that was made at some point with the three of us. It just, I missed that thing. We're going to have to find that. We're going to leave this show here. We're going to say goodbye, but we thank everyone for joining us. Thanks to Marc Berman, Dean of the Knick Beat, enjoying the retirement life down in Florida. Thanks to John Macri, Dean of Knicks Film School, which you have to get involved with if you're not already. And we will be back here on the Putback 2:45 tomorrow, 15 minutes ahead of the deadline, to talk about what has happened, what hasn't happened, and break it all down then. So we hope to see everybody tomorrow afternoon.